Hey everybody, welcome back to the Meaningforge. Today I have with me Marlana Semenza. She's a storyteller through photography, and she's built her business on the fact that everyone has a story, and she wants to communicate those stories as far and wide as possible. So today we're going to go through the Meaningforge process. We're going to see how she makes, embodies, and shares meaning in her life. Welcome to the show. Hello, welcome to the Meaningforge.
Well, hey there. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's a great time, I promise. As you can see, we're in the business of not only sharing stories, which is awesome, but we're also in the business of finding out how people really kind of find meaning in their life and then make, embody, and share that meaning. So again, welcome. And kind of to dive on in, what inspires you to do your business? Like how did you come up with your business model?
It was actually kind of stemmed from the past that I had. When I was always a photographer, I went to college for photography. I have a degree in photography. I'm one of those rare birds that does. But I also did a lot of other things over the course of my career. I had a minor in illustration, and I worked for a cartooning and animation company. I did set styling and design and interior design and location scouting and worked in the advertising space. And when I got into personal brand photography, what that did is that took all of the elements of everything I had done to me, the storytelling um, and the location scouting. And also too, my very first job out of college was I worked for the director of photography for the World Wrestling Federation. So there I learned a lot about personas and characters and bringing all of that to life. So personal brand photography kind of wraps all that up with one neat bow.
So now I have to ask the question, why photography? Since
Well,
it's just there. Just starting right off, like why
yeah,
photography?
my grandfather actually put a camera in my hand when I was a kid, and that was probably my first foray into photography, and I loved it. I loved the way it allowed you to see things, the way it forced you to make decisions as far as what was being seen. It allowed you to tell a story. It allowed you to capture a moment in time. There are so many aspects to it. And at its core, really, photography is just a relationship with light. And once you develop that relationship and make it better, you also know just how far you can push that relationship, what the relationship will give you in return, all those kinds of things. So it's just an ongoing process that I love.
I have to think. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's really deep. It's really so you chose for photography because, to sum it up, a relationship with light and decisions, what to see through, like how you can angle things. All those fun things, right? And it's not
Mhm.
just to do a photography joke. It's not just like getting down on the ground and flipping the cameras upside down and trying to get the right angle. I'm sure that's part of it to a degree, but it's
See,
that
well,
relationship with light.
yeah, well, here's the thing. Most people walk around with the tool of my trade on their person at all times because you have a phone and there's a camera in in that phone. But photographers make a host of decisions every time they they make an image. It's decisions about angle, it's decisions about light, it's decisions about cropping and what you will see or won't see. It's decisions about where to put the focus. And so it's a lot more to it than just picking up this tool and snapping a shutter. And so all of those things go into telling somebody's story or telling the story of a scene, because what you choose to include is important, but what you choose to exclude is also very important.
You can always tell when someone's passionate about something because they use romantic language when romantic slash poetic language when trying to when just not trying but describing it. And that is amazing that within the first few minutes of this interview, like photography is so ingrained in I guess could you dial in a little bit more on the feeling that you had when you first had that camera put in your hands by your grandfather?
Mhm.
Like what did that feel like?
At first, it was a creative outlet. I always had that creative element to my personality. I remember when I was young, my dad was creative. He sketched and things like that, and I remember even as a child sitting there and he would teach me about perspective and things like that as far as illustration goes. But for when you have a tool that allows you to express what you are seeing, it opens up new worlds, and it kind of allows other people to see the world that's in your head.
Share the world. Okay. So I appreciate that dive right there. Like that's actually really useful because like I mean I'm trying to figure out now how we can kind of start taking this in, but I need a little bit more information. So I guess so without photography, and I know this might be a challenge question, right? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how did you get here to where you are today?
I was born in New Jersey, raised in Connecticut. I never lived more than an hour outside of New York City my whole life until we moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. And that was a little bit of a culture shock in some ways, but because of all the traveling I did when I worked for WWF, it wasn't that big of a stretch for me because back then I saw 32 states, many of them more than once. And I love exploring new places, seeing what the different varieties of elements of any place or situation is. And I think maybe that comes from the observer part of me, just to be able to look and take it all in.
Hmm. So originally you said New Jersey, right?
Born in New Jersey,
Okay. So
raised
originally
in
you're from
Connecticut.
New Jersey, traveling a lot and traveling with the WWF as well, right?
Mhm.
So that's awesome. What was a major event? It kind of sticks out in your mind. That kind of comes to mind um, from your time with WWF.
It was such a unique experience, and I didn't go away to college. So when I took that job, I was originally supposed to work in photo editing, and instead my boss in the interview said, "Well, do you have any problem with airplanes?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, that's good because instead you're gonna be my assistant, you're gonna come on the road," which was all fine and good. I never watched wrestling in my life. So I climbed on a tour bus, woke up the next morning, walked backstage at the arena, and looked around and went, "What have I done?" But what I learned from the experience and these people, um, when you spend that much time around people and the 100 and plus people that you are with are it's a shared experience. And never having been in the military, I don't know if this is a similar experience, but it's the only thing I can relate it to. It's all of you know what that experience is. And somebody on the outside is never going to see it the same, never going to experience it the same. You you experience the highs, the lows, the dysfunctionality, the creativity. I watched some amazing performers and athletes go out and give 150% every night because that was such a part of them, and that's what they believed, that the people that paid to be there, that's what they deserved, and that stays with you. I watched them create these personas that they could put on in a fraction of a second and become that person. And all of these things shape you in the sense that you learn how the best does it. And so I think you take a little bit away from every experience that you have. And so that's some of what I took away from that experience.
From the what I'll say is I don't really. Some people want to jump to like the military and stuff like that, and that makes sense, right? Like the bonds that you form. I would say anytime you experience some form of community-based adversity or something to that effect, putting on a show like those teams are tight. So I can see that in the WWF. I can see, all the other things, especially if you're doing it on the road, like new places, new things. You forget something, you forgot something, so on and so forth. And so that's really, I appreciate that, because those bonds are things that can last a while, and not only last a while as far as friendships, but also last a while internally. So thank you for sharing that. And when did you start your own company for photography? And what was a major, what was a major lesson that you learned from that?
I started my own probably around the year 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a combination, because like I said, I was always doing photography, but I was also doing all these other things because, and we can get into this if you choose to, but there was a large piece of me, I think, along the way that had a lot of self-doubt, as far as my career, as far as my abilities, all those kinds of things. And there were people along the way too that fed into that for me. But so I think that's why I always had a foot in something else, because it was always a plan B. Okay, well, if the photography doesn't work out, then at least I know I can do this. But I enjoyed those other experiences. And the people, when I look back, the people that I got to work with were unbelievable talents. And like I said, you learn from everybody if you allow yourself, you learn from everybody that you have these experiences with. So even to see their creative processes and the way that they worked, whether it was in the design world or in the animation world or any of that, I'm in awe of the talent that I got to be around and work with.
There's two things there that I think that are useful, right? I mean, the self-doubt, I'm trying to figure out where I want to put that right now, because like I'm trying to get like the groundwork, right? The landscape. But that might just be something we kick into the hammer phase. Starting. So when you were starting your business, you always had one foot in what you were doing, and then you started it. I guess, what was the decision that you made to finally say, I'm going all in?
We moved. So when we moved to North Carolina, and I no longer had the safety net of anything else. It became a decision, well, you need to decide what you want to be and who you want to be and what you really want to do. And so at that point, it was all in with photography.
That makes sense. There's a lot of that, actually. Some people, like, when they move, it's a forcing function to follow. In some cases, to follow their dreams and their passions, or I don't want to call it passions, because like more like purpose type things. versus when, they're comfortable in this space. Like, and so adventures is a key part of, growing into something that you want to be, if that
Right.
makes any sense, right?
Also, too,
So,
when you're in a situation where you are surrounded by such talents and you're young, you kind of automatically go into the background and automatically go into the shadows, so to speak, and let the other people who are older or more experienced or any of that kind of stuff take center stage. And then because you realize you don't realize there's a piece of you, I think, that thinks that, well, I'm just not that yet. But there comes a point, I think, when all of that isn't around you anymore. You still don't take away from how great and how wonderful they are, but you realize that, you know what, you are too in your own way. And I think that's what a lot of people fail to realize and accept, is that you don't have to be good like them. You just need to be good like you.
all right. Well, now we are now in the hammer. We're actually now in the forge. We gathered some materials. We looked around the landscape. We have some more materials coming in, and we're going to start forging our sword, which is the embodiment of our meaning at some level. And I think the first thing that we want to dive into is, what's the hardest part about overcoming self-doubt, and how that, I guess, the story around how you overcame self-doubt helped shape you into who you are today.
The hardest part, I think, is getting out of your own way. Because is it really the story other people are telling you, or is it just the story that you're telling yourself in your own head? And where's the evidence of that story? So you can think, oh, I'm not up to this challenge, or I'm not good enough for that. Well, based on what? And I think a lot of that comes with age and experience, because and thinking, why not me? Why? Yeah, I can do that too. I may do it differently, but I can do that too. And I think that's, for creatives too, a lot of comparison sets in, which is never a good thing. I used to, when I was younger, look at others' work and compare mine to it. And that's always a problem. Now I look at the work of others and I see, what can I learn from it? What can I pick up from it? Is there some kind of technique? Is there some kind of way that they went about this that I can make into my own? Because one of my favorite quotes that I ever heard was Bruce Lee quote about how, take what is useful, reject what is not, and make it uniquely your own. And it's never about copying somebody else. It's never about doing anything that's not yours, but you can still learn from the way others do it and make it your own.
You brought up Bruce Lee, which is always interesting. I think that might be a first on the Meaning Forge, because like Bruce Lee, huge fan too, right? I'm kind of right now, what I'm wrestling with is, I think there's two ideas, and we hit on it at the very end of the life story portion, and it's you hit on getting out of your own way. And I think this question, why not me, is really useful, right? And looking at techniques of others, and not comparing necessarily your work from a creative standpoint, or even logical business wise. Like, it's useful to compare as far as techniques are concerned. Like, what technique do I need to learn? What piece of information do I need to, kind of start chasing? And then there's this idea of I may butcher this a little bit, but it's like, it's good to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
It's the only thing you
understanding.
can't get wrong.
Go ahead.
Being yourself is the only thing you can't get wrong.
Exactly. And so with that, I think it kind of comes full circle with Bruce Lee. It's like, takes what's useful and then reject what's not. And, that could be any time in your life. That could be a particular moment, whatever the case may be. That you can't remember everything. And then you use it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, keep trying. And I love that. So I guess into the next question here for the hammer is, who's been the most influential person in your life? And I know that people don't want to call out certain people, but I'm only going to allow one. Who's the most influential person that's been formative to you, and why?
Part of me, my initial instinct is probably to say my grandfather, and he passed when I was young. But because he is the one that put the camera in my hand in the first place, he is the one. He was kind. He was gentle. He cared about people. He had a very high level of ethics and showing up for people and giving them your best and doing your best in whatever work you did. Very strong family ties, all that. So I would say him.
We've already got a memory of that one. So unfortunately, I can't ask and why, right? Well, anyway, I want to give you number two. Who else was influential to you, and why? And let's dial in maybe more recently. Who's someone who you've talked to in the last 5 years who's been influential to you and helped you get through a tough spot, and why?
See, it goes back to it takes a village,
Okay.
and I think you need a host of people. I know that Holly. We both know Holly, and Holly says you need an internal board of directors, and I think that's exactly the case, because you go to different people for different things.
Mm-hmm.
And you also go to different people for the way you want information delivered to you. If you need to be kind of smacked in the face with something, you may go to one person to get their opinion. If you need something broken to you gently, you may go to another person for their opinion. So I don't think it's one person. I think you have to build, as Holly says, that internal board of directors and draw from all of them.
We had a great conversation on that. We called it the internal board of directors.
Yeah.
At the end of all that, because it was within the mind, kind of pulling from Napoleon Hill. It was a great conversation. And I guess since that's fine, what type of personalities or what types of things are you looking for in your general board of directors to kind of help you make, I don't want to say make decisions, because I think at some point you've already made decisions, but to talk through ideas and stuff like that. Like what are some types of people that you need?
I need people that are astute in business. I need people that are creative. One of the people is my friend Claire, who is another brand photographer. I bounce a lot of things off of her because we play in a similar arena. I need people who will keep me morally and ethically grounded. I need people that will push me farther, because I think you always need people that will shove you out of your comfort zone, not necessarily lightly either. Because if you're not uncomfortable, then you're not growing. And I think that's really important, to surround yourself with people that inspire you and people that you want to be more like, because this way, I read once that it said, if you look around your circle and you're not inspired, you don't have a circle, you have a cage. And I think that's a really interesting way to put it, because you should be inspired when you look around the people that you surround yourself with.
I like that too, because you should be inspired by people who are around you, and it's kind of like the same thing as you shouldn't be the smartest person in the room.
Right.
And if you're the smartest person in the room, or you're not inspired, then you are effectively becoming a cage, or I would take a step further and say you're caging other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem too, right? Yeah. So okay, so welcome to the sword. This is where we start talking about the embodiment of meaning, right? And I think we had a really great segue at the end of the hammer, which is we're talking about it takes a village, and to be creative and to be inspirational, and you want to have a community around you who is always pushing you, or I would even argue pulling you, right? Pulling you into something, and the need for adventure, and that's where I think we are, right? At this point, we're kind of sitting there, kind of talking about this for a little bit, because in the forge, we make our sword. We've made it through photography. We've made it through your experiences with WWF. We've made it through your adventure here in the North Carolina area, right? And then we kind of pulled together the board of directors, the internal board of directors, those people who help inspire us. And along the way, we'll also overcome self-doubt. Mm-hmm. So, and that's a key thing when in being confident in carrying your sword next to you, carrying what you've made, embodying your meaning. So I guess the hard question I'd like to ask is, what do you think your purpose is at this moment in your life, and why?
To kind of be all of that for others. So as you were talking through all that, I thought to myself, that's what I try and do for the people that I work for. I don't take on every client who calls me. The reason why is because I have to make sure that we are a good fit, because I always say I have to fall a little in love with them in order to get other people to fall in love with them. And so once they are a client of mine, I will cheer for them. I will make introductions for them when it's appropriate. I will shine the spotlight on them. Because I believe that they are extraordinary. And so if there is self-doubt, I will squash that. I don't want anybody to ever hold themselves back for all that they can achieve and be seen for when I see it.
So you're really turning into not only a photographer for branding, but also like a coach. That part of that internal board of director to like reach up for more, be more inspired. Is that accurate?
I don't know if it's a coach as much as a cheerleading team. I love the people that I get to work with, and each one of them, when I look at images of them, my initial reaction is, oh, I just love them. Oh, I just love them. And because of that, I try and exude that into my communication about them, my communication with them.
So trying to think here. There's something there that I'm trying to dial in on. So like listening to this, what I'm kind of thinking of, it's like, so like you're wielding the sword, right? Like you're making decisions, you're making judgments, right? And you have like, at some point it's looking at them, and let me know if I'm off here, or maybe I'm overreading into this, but it's looking at them and saying, I instead of cutting away certain things, right? Like you cut away, like you're empowering them by giving a version of your sword to them to help, that helps kind of inspire them along the way. Does that make sense?
Perhaps. And the thing is, I don't think, even when I approach telling their story, it's not about, yes, there is choosing to not tell certain things.
Of course.
But that's because, number one, I believe that everybody deserves a measure of privacy, and you don't have to tell every little bit about everything. But the other thing is, if it's something that is just simply not relevant, then that's okay. What it doesn't mean is that I'm never going to show the warts or the scars or any of that kind of thing, because that is part of who you are. And that is part of what makes you unique and special and amazing. So it's knowing what to include based on who we're telling the story to, because there's always somebody on the other end, and it's relating what that person needs to know about whoever I'm photographing.
Sorry, I'm so deep into this. I'm trying to, because there's a lot there. Like there's a lot there, right? Like, I mean, like, so you make it around, you made this is what I'm seeing, right? You're embodying this sense of meaning around telling people stories around some of your own struggles, right? And then being, to some degree, like you have to make a discernment on like who is a good client and who is not, right? And it's not just based off of I'm sure there's a challenge aspect to that, of course, to
Sure.
we're most creative.
And also too, if I say that we're not a good fit, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with me or them or anything like that. It just means that I'm just not the best person to tell that story. And
Agreed.
And I have other friends that may be able to tell it much better. And so
Exactly.
It still needs to be told, just not necessarily by me.
Exactly. And that's always a hard decision to make, because typically sometimes I ask like business leaders and stuff like that, like, when do you let someone go or something like that? How do you let someone go? Like when, like these questions, because sometimes people may not be a fit for a particular culture or a particular time in their life. And you have to kind of say, I have no issues helping you move on or something like that. You're just not a fit here. And someone else can do something better for you, because maybe you need more experience. Mm-hmm. Maybe you need more people, more teachers or something to that effect. I've taught you everything that I can.
Right.
And that's a hard decision to make. It's a very hard decision to make. And sometimes I think people make it very negative.
I don't think, from my standpoint, it's not a hard decision. And I'll tell you why I don't think it's a hard decision.
Please.
Because I'm not making the decision for me. I'm making the decision for them to have the best for them. And so with that in mind, because it's for their best interest, it's to get them the best for them. It's not a hard decision for me, because it's not about me.
That's a great framing, and making sure that it's looking after their best interest. And then you can, if they're within the certain parameters, again, like I'm sure it's more based off of a feeling, right? Those parameters, then you can start developing that relationship or something like that. What, I guess, just out of curiosity, I don't want to focus too much on the logical side, but like, what's a feeling you're looking for when you're looking for clients to tell a story, that you can tell their story? Like what is the feeling of the aha moment? I can tell the story.
Well, that comes through a process. But it's easier and I think it's always easier for people to say, what are your hard no's? Because if you already know what your no's are going into a situation, it becomes much easier to make a decision. So for example, I won't get involved with stories that are inherently spiritual or political or things like that. I have no problem with you telling them or doing whatever you need to do. It's just I'm not the best person to tell those, because in my world they're too divisive, and I just choose to not. But so knowing that, if I scrub through, who somebody is and do a little research on them and all that, and it turns out that, oh no, I am campaigning for mayor and I need you to help me with my brand. Well, that's a political arena, and so that I'm just not the best person for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just knowing what your hard no's are will help you make decisions instead of sitting on the fence. Now, once I take somebody on as a client, there's a big long questionnaire that they fill out, so I can get to know them a little bit better and understand what the jumping off point to tell their story is. And almost never is the jumping off point what they actually wrote on the paper. So when I get the questionnaire back, we have an in-depth discussion about it. And it's at that point that I start to connect the dots and we get a jumping off point.
Kind of like what we're doing here. It's funny how, like, when you know someone's story as well, like it kind of helps frame it in a better light. And so mm-hmm. I appreciate you sharing all that and diving into to the sword questions and the embodiment of those things, because it's here where you start going off on your adventure and stuff like that. And I guess before we move on, when you started your company and you were forced into that making your company because you had to move, what was your biggest lesson learned? And I guess that lesson learned that you want communicated to other people, and why?
If you believe that you can truly make a difference in any kind of arena, if you believe that you truly have something to give to others, you are doing them a disservice to not. Because there is somebody out there that needs what you do, the way you do it, and only you are able to provide that for them because it's you.
There we go. All right. So that's the sword. And again, this is great. For those of you who are watching, please like, comment, subscribe, engage with the platform that you're watching or listening on, because this will eventually be on Buzzsprout. This will be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and a few others. So please leave a review, please, on whatever platform that is. And most importantly, take these moments to share with people what you're learning from this. And we have 2 more symbols to go through: the pin, the crown, and then we'll get into summary and Marlena's final words. So now we'll transition into the pin, and the pin is super easy. 2 questions. It's not easy because they're hard questions. Jesus Christ. All right. Welcome to the pin. So as we see, we've kind of constructed the story in our own right? Like the story of life. And the way I like to look at this is the hammer is, part of your life story, the landscape of your life, the materials that we've pulled into the forge that you make into yourself. at any given moment, multiple swords a day, doesn't matter. And then you make your sword, you carry it around for a while. You say, this is what I think it is. And you act on that. You make judgment calls. And now we're into the pen. And the pen is in a way sharing meaning in your life. And not only sharing meaning in your life, but like, what is the legacy that you would like to leave? And this is always a hard question. These are harder questions because what I like to do is really throw this into the future, right? Like really throw it like far into the future. And there's two questions. So 2,000 years in the future, what is the essence that you would like people to remember you by, and why? Like the simple idea that you want them to remember you by, and why?
That she made my life better.
That who?
That she made my life better.
And why is that?
Because I think whenever you interact with people, there are three choices. They can either walk away from you having their life worse for knowing you, having their life unaffected by knowing you, or having their life been made better by knowing you. You never want to be the first one because that's just rotten. And if they're unaffected, what was the point? So I want to leave people better than I found them.
That's a great answer. And then the next question, right, is what is the 2,000 years in the future? They're doing an archaeological dig on your house, wherever your final house is, right? What is the one item you want them to find? The one item that survives all of it, and why?
It would be probably either my box full of negatives that I have from way back in the day, or the external hard drives that I have, because there are just so many stories on both.
I feel like a copy from Dr. Holly.
Really?
A little bit, yeah. So from an education perspective, she wanted the hard drives to be found, because like people can teach and learn and stuff. And so I thought that's interesting. And so in the future, they could find whatever. I guess why. So the hard drives are because of the stories,
right?
Why the box of negatives?
Same reason. It's just that those images and those negatives are stored differently now. It's still the same idea, because even now I'm fascinated by old photos, and to see them and think, what were those people experiencing? What happened in their lives? What made them who they are? And, I don't know if you've ever gone into the city. I used to live not far from New York City. And so I would go in a fair amount of time. And one of the best things to do was sit there and just watch people. And friends of mine and I sometimes used to make up stories about what was going on in their life at the time. And I think it's a similar thing. If you were to find old photos, old negatives now, you can kind of make up stories. They might be right. They might not be right. But it would be an interesting exercise to see what you got right.
But sometimes I would say they don't need to be right. Right? They can be as fantastical or creative as you want them to be.
It's true. And sometimes the stories that we learn later on are even more fantastical than what we made up in our head.
Oh, the truth is always more fantastical. 9 times out of 10. I love that. So, well, thank you for sharing on the pen. And the pen is, again, it's the legacy that we leave, and it's made someone's life better. And then I'll give you your 2 items: a box of negatives, and an external hard drive that people can uncover. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for wanting to preserve those stories for people, or at least give people the ability to create their stories of their own.
Yeah.
We'll go into the crown. All right, so the crown, the final symbol, and it is the final thing that represents the burden of responsibility, taking on the things that matter, leading yourself and leading others, right? And I guess one of the first things I kind of want to lead in with is, what is the hardest part about, like, what's the hardest habit, besides self-doubt, because I think we kind of touched on that you had to overcome, and why?
I would say definitely the self-doubt part, but also too, I think I have in the past too quickly said yes to things without taking a pause to see if it was a fit for me. And also too, to not take opportunities when they have been presented to me. So it sounds like a contradictory statement, but it's just two sides of the same coin, I think.
So the failure to take on certain opportunities, and the realization too late that certain opportunities are not a fit for you. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And I guess, what have you done to kind of help maybe prevent some of that? Because at some level, it's not preventable. Like, I think we're always going to do those things. But what's some steps that you've done to prevent that?
Pausing before I say yes. Anything that we say yes to, there's always a trade-off. It can be a trade-off of time. It can be a trade-off of money, but there's always a trade. And money is one thing because we can always make more of it, but time we can't. So it's usually those kinds of situations that I really need to pause and say, is this something that I need to be involved with or not? As far as taking opportunities when they are presented, I'll give you an example. Recently, when I was in college, one of the places that I wanted to work for was Rolling Stone. Wanted to work there in the worst way. I actually wanted Annie Leibovitz's career, but that's a whole story in itself. But I never got a chance to work for Rolling Stone. Instead, I got on the tour bus with wrestling, and that was that whole rock and roll kind of thing. Anyway, recently I met a gentleman who runs something called Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. And in talking to him, he asked if I would come out and photograph and tell the story of the first ever women's only rock camp, which is going to be in the beginning of May. And that was a no-brainer for me because it was an opportunity. Even though, does it make me anxious? Sure. But I think any opportunity that is exciting, any opportunity that you grow from, is always going to be there's always going to be some anxiety attached to it, because once again, that's how you grow. And do I think that I can do it? Sure, I think I can do it. But it's the pressure that we put on ourselves to create what we have in our head. So I know what I want to get out of it. I know what I want to be able to produce out of it. It's just a matter. So it's bridging that gap between, well, can I? I don't know till I get there and I see what the whole situation is. But I know what I want in my head.
That is that's great that you're going to take this on at the time of recording. It's say it's mid-April, and so I can't wait to see that some of those stories pop up and populate somewhere. And I hope that you'll share them at least on your LinkedIn for everyone to see, because that's I've seen some of your work, and some of the stories you post are like, it's great. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I guess, what is your when leading yourself, what is maybe your biggest fear?
I can be very hard on myself as far as what standard I want to create for people, what standard of work. And I think there's a fear of perhaps not achieving that. And unfortunately, I get over my own work very quickly. So I may look at it the first time going through and I think, oh my gosh, I love this. I love this. And then by the third time I look at it, I'm like, I'm over that. You could have done this better. You could have done that better. I wish you had done this. And so I have to put it aside for a while, and then I'll come back to it a little while later and, oh, look, I love this. But I think for me, it's a constant pushing of pushing the creative, pushing the envelope a little bit, testing the boundaries of creativity. And I don't want to give people just okay, ever. I want them to have better than they imagined. And so it's the fear of not being able to produce that. And I know during the creative process, when I'm working with somebody, when I'm achieving that. And because usually they'll see me start to dance around and things like that. So, so I know that there's something there at that point. But I think it's that. I think it's just not giving them what I so desperately want them to have.
And I'm assuming your biggest joy then is to when you meet the standard of work that you have and you're in that flow state and you're delivering, as you said, dancing, you're delivering on that and telling people a story that just completely meshes with every level of your being. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And because part of what I do is I don't work in a studio. So I really don't have anything that's controlled per se. Yes, I understand lighting, obviously, and I know how to manipulate it and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm going into locations and situations and things like that and not always knowing 100% what's going to be there, what the parameters are going to be, so there's always a little bit of anxiety with every session because of that, but all works out in the end.
It does. And well, I appreciate you going through the crown. And I think we kind of hit on things, right? We've talked about yourself and leading yourself, and we've talked about leading others in some regards. So continue to wear that crown, and thank you so much for that. And we'll go ahead and jump into summary.
Okay.
All right. So, Marlana, thank you so much for coming on Meaningforge today. And I think I've already have a title with this interview. It's the relationship with light. It's something to deal with that, and dealing with stories and dealing with the, I would almost say poetically, the light of the people inside of their hearts that you're trying to illuminate. And that in and of itself, a great little flow state for me. But so thank you so much for coming on. And from New Jersey to North Carolina, it's been one adventure after another. From the second that your grandfather put the camera in your hands, and that realization that not only a creative outlet, but the belief that, again, that you must do this, that you need to do this, was there. And we start to kind of see people wanting to tell stories. And through the hammer, what we looked at was some of your experiences of having a board of directors, an internal board of directors, to, why that's important, why taking what is useful in time and space and overcoming self-doubt is important. And then going into the sword again, going out on an adventure and making judgments, being confident in what is within the scope. I don't want to call it scope of work, but like the scope of who you are, right? Because you can only tell certain stories at the end of the day. That's stories that you identify with, that you work with, and that you can see that light, right? That relationship, you can see that relationship. And then we went into the pen, and it's very simple: make someone's life better, and then being able to tell stories off of the photographs that you have. And let's hope that people can, we don't go into a complete dark age, right? After World War III or whatnot. And people can still read hard drives and whatnot. So thank you for sharing that. And then in the crown, we talked about, I guess the way I would frame it is a due diligence process, almost like I need to know what, I don't want to rush into too many decisions. I need to fit in with this and have some kind of process for doing that. And not only that, but there should be a welcoming of some kind of anxiety. And again, like I don't want to get crazy and say, being overly anxious is a good idea.
Right.
There should be some kind of pull that this is just a little bit beyond me, but I can do this. And having that confidence again with the sword, right? Now you're leading yourself and you're leading others, and meeting the standard of work. And really, because you've gone through this process, you're able to have, again, this relationship with light in people's heart and tell their story. So thank you so much for coming on the Meaning Forge today. And I guess, does that sum up our conversation?
Sure.
And what have you learned throughout this experience? Have you learned anything?
I think one of the things that was a little light was shed on is the fact that, like I said earlier, I try and become some of what I needed for other people, which was interesting for me.
Yeah, because that was, that came out of to make someone's life better, and then to kind of be the cheerleader aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
I see that as well. Yeah. So what, I guess if you were to pick a symbol, the hammer, sword, pin, or crown, which is your favorite and why?
I would say the crown because they're pretty.
There you go, right?
Diamonds on that thing. I could do whatever I want.
There you go. That's awesome. And then, this is kind of the area where we kind of, just kind of joke around a little bit before we go into final words. And what, I guess, what has been the funniest thing that's happened during a photo shoot? I mean, of course, things are going to happen. So,
well, I used to photograph weddings way back in the day. I photographed probably pretty much everything over the course of my career, but I photographed weddings. And I really think that all wedding vendors should get together and write a book, because the things that we see, people would not even, you wouldn't believe. And one of the instances I recall was a wedding where the groom had invited his ex-girlfriend. Why, I have no idea. But she got a little inebriated and was out on the dance floor with the groom and started loud, "I can't believe you married her. This should have been us." So I would say that was probably the most awkward thing that I ever encountered at any job I have ever encountered.
So that's awkward. Like, I guess, what's the most like rolling on the ground laughter moment that you've ever had as well?
I don't know. Gosh, I don't know.
Okay.
Because I'm always trying to get the people that I photograph to laugh and always try and make it an enjoyable experience. So the laughter is usually theirs as
Mm.
opposed to mine. And I have photos from pretty much every session where somebody's hysterically laughing.
They make good photos sometimes.
They do. They do.
For me, I think from my wedding, for some reason, my photographer got a bunch of pictures with my mouth open all the time, and I'm like, could you not have found a picture where my mouth is like
Well,
closed?
that's why I don't think photographers should photograph the certain parts of the reception, because when
Mhm.
everybody's eating, nobody needs a photo of that.
Oh, I wasn't eating. I was just talking to people.
Yeah,
Like every conversation, like every
you
like
got a lot to
group.
say.
I mean, I'm just like, I know I don't talk that much, but like you managed to capture every single time that I have my mouth open, and I was like, like very few photos. Anyway, it was a great experience, and thanks for all the photographers out there and vendors for weddings and whatnot. But
You get an education, I will tell you that, doing weddings.
that's a fact. That is a fact. And so, again, thank you so much for coming on Meaning Forge today. Before we go into final words, what are top 3 book recommendations that you have for people to read?
I know this is gonna may sound odd. Um, 2 of my favorites for a similar reason, but different reasons are actually I'm a Bible reader,
Okay.
and also there's a book called An Incomplete Education that
Mm-hmm.
I'm always fascinated by that book and what's in it because it's kind of like the crib notes of everything that you should have learned in college
Mm-hmm.
but didn't. And as far as the third book, I'm a reader, so I'm gonna say whatever book is on tap next.
Nice. I like that. I like that. Always like I have a never-ending stack of books, and I'm sure as you said, a reader, right? The books that you've read to the stack that you have. I guess the question is, what's your ratio? Do you have like a 1-to-1?
I used to have bookcases crammed full of books that I had read. Um, from moving several times over the years, each time I would give more and more and more away. So now I don't know, I might have 100 books left out of the 1,000 that I probably did. Um,
Mm-hmm. For me, this is pretty much most of the books. I have some other like reference material over here.
mhm,
Um, but like I'm like on probably like a 1-to-5
mhm.
ratio. Like I've read one of like 20% of my books. I'm probably pushing like a third because like I have audio too. I count audio.
Yeah, no,
Um,
out of all of the books that I currently own, I've read all but maybe 3.
you are batting like way like that's impressive, right? That right there is impressive because some of the books I have are like for reference and stuff, and so that is impressive. Having almost a 1-to-1 ratio, like that is like master level reader.
The
But
sad
anyway,
thing is that I like to have the physical book.
mhm.
So, there's my house just isn't that big. So, I after a while, you can only have so many, and then you have to purge.
I understand. I understand, and there's nothing for me. I buy a lot of I do buy used books,
Mhm.
just because I like to see what people write in the margins.
Mm.
Sometimes, especially if it's like a philosophical business book or something
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
that. Just because like what people highlight, what people write in the margins is interesting because it's like a glimpse into how they interpreted it.
Mhm.
So, but anyway, that's great. We'll go ahead and transition to your final words. Thank you so much for coming on Meaning Forge. And it sounds like you had a pleasant experience. So we will get into your final words of wisdom.
Okay. I would say, know who you are, know that it's enough, know that you don't have to know it all. You can just learn as you go, that somebody needs whatever it is that you do, the way you do it. And it is up to you to don't worry about what others say about you or think about you, because you can direct that. You can help shape that. And it's more important what you say about you and you think about you, because that's where your strength will always come from.